This, my friends, is the cheap PC case for NVIDIA fans out there. Why, you ask? Well, just take a look at the aesthetics and you'll understand what I mean. As a matter of fact, I really think today's Antec NX420 kinda resembles and imitates NVIDIA's Founders Edition look, which by no means has to be a bad thing. In fact, it's the exact reason I'm even taking a look at this nice, affordable case in the first place. At the time of making this video, it costs about $75 US, even less over here in Europe, which isn't necessarily much for a PC case, especially for one that comes with a bit of ARGB lighting too. But what's more important, is the NX420 any good, or has Antec gone in the wrong direction with this one? Besides the boxy box itself, we're even getting accessories in a small white box with screws and whatnot. As mentioned before, I truly find the design to be quite interesting and in some way a bit daring. It really does make an impression as if this model is screaming Founders Edition, albeit on a lower quality level and especially at a lower price point. Even though I'd still say the main construction is decent enough, one quickly notices that fairly thin and not the highest quality of steel has been used. This also can be seen when glancing over to the weight of a mere 5 kilograms. Still, we need to lower our expectations a bit when dealing with a $75 case. In Europe, we're looking at even lower pricing, so there's that. Aside from that, there's also a bit of ARGB on board, which certainly eats away on the budget. Others will just say they could have gone without any lighting to start with, but the opinions tend to differ on that one. There are quite a few that value RGB lighting. I tend to have a fairly neutral opinion on it. What I've noticed early on is the fact that the tempered glass panel is slightly submerged into the case, which may look nice, but can be a bit impractical when having to remove the panel, especially if you prefer to avoid having your fingerprints all over the glass. In itself, the tempered glass is quite nice, albeit it's quite heavily tinted, something not everyone's into. The NX420 supports ATX, micro ATX as well as mini ATX motherboards, and a lot of fans and even pretty beefy radiators have room in here, although only a single 120mm fan is pre-installed on the rear. In the front you could mount up to a 360 or 280mm radiator, at the top a standard 240mm one. Rubber grommets are non-existent here to save some costs, yet we do get quite a few cathode holes to route our cables. Obviously, that Antec logo, along with that vertical stripe at the front, is illuminated. By pressing the LED control button at the I/O, one can switch between a few different colors and effects. However, we don't get the option to synchronize the lighting with our motherboard, which is a bit of a bummer if you ask me. Still, I believe you could work with an adapter and get that working, but unfortunately, there's none such included. Behind the plastic front panel, there's hiding a dust filter, by the way. On the bottom for the power supply, a removable one, albeit one of the cheap kind. And for the top we get a classic magnetic dust filter. I find it nice that on the main side we can mount 2 SSDs directly next to the motherboard, and down below on the PSU shroud there's a tray which you can use to park another one of your SSDs. On a side note, there's also a cathode hole for our power supply, making it somewhat visible. Behind the motherboard tray, there's another one of these 2.5-inch trays for an SSD, but we do in fact also have a conventional hard drive cage in here. One 3.5-inch drive can be installed in it, and another one could be mounted to the roof of the cage. This also applies for a 2.5-inch drive. Definitely worth mentioning in this price range, in my opinion, is that the hard drive cage can slightly be repositioned to make a little more room for one's PSU or its cables. And should you not need the cage at all, you could remove it out of the case entirely. Far less impressive are the expansion slots, or rather the brackets. While 2 of these can be reused, the remaining ones need to be broken out, which in my eyes is a strong no-go these days. Luckily, those 2 reusable ones make up a lot for the others that are not. Vertical GPU installation is not an option in here, and quite frankly, no one wishes to do that in this particular case anyway, at least I hope so. Other than that, cards with a length of up to 330mm fit into the NX420. And obviously, even my usual PC case test system fits perfectly in here. There's no clearance issue between the radiator and motherboard, thanks to the mounting holes that have been moved further to the side. Unfortunately, we don't really get any good airflow within the case out of the box, since all we get is a single pre-installed rear fan. I'd strongly recommend adding 1 or even 2 fans in the front. That way even high-end systems are able to breathe sufficiently. As for the I/O panel, nothing out of the ordinary really, but still 3 USB ports, only one of which happens to be USB 3.2 though, and that's generation 1. Oh, and the pre-installed fan luckily is fairly quiet and connects via a 3-pin connector. Unfortunately, I have to admit, you need to be some sort of cable management god if you want to present or rather hide most cables nice and tidy. With my limited patience, the result is subpar at best, but it's somewhat okay. So the bottom line is, you've probably noticed that the Antec NX420 doesn't fully convince me. To be fair, there's not a whole lot that can be done in this lower price range. So this PC case definitely neither screams quality, nor is it particularly well equipped out of the box, but there's a glimmer of hope actually. There's quite the potential for future upgrades with this one. There's room for radiators, a lot of fans, and especially more hard drives and SSDs can go in here than your average case in this price range. Therefore, it's far from being a bad case. What I would have wished for most, though, is an additional fan in the front as an intake. You'd have to take care of that one on your own. Nonetheless, a nice fancy low-budget PC case with quite the interesting aesthetic to it at a price of $75 or less over here in Europe. Thanks a lot for watching everyone, and please take care.